So, picture this. It's 1949, and the Chinese Communist Party takes power. And they don't just inherit a country, they inherit a nation on its knees. What they did next? Well, it was one of the most massive social engineering projects in modern history. So let's dive in and figure out how they even began to tackle remaking an entire society from the ground up. And to really get a handle on just how big of a challenge this was, you just need to know one number: 85%. That's how many people in China couldn't read or write in 1949. Just think about that. I mean, how do you even begin to build a modern country when the vast majority of your people are illiterate? It's a staggering problem.
Which, brings us to the big question we're tackling here. With everything stacked against them and education and health, what was the CCP's plan? What did they actually do? And I think this is the most important part, did any of it actually work?
All right, so first, we really need to set the scene. The China the CCP inherited in 1949, wow, its problems were so much deeper than just politics. We're talking about the absolute basics of a functioning society, health, education, that were either falling apart or in huge parts of the country just weren't there to begin with.
And when you look at the details, it gets even crazier. So, education wasn't just for a tiny few. It was also totally out of date. It was all about memorizing old classics to become a government official, not learning things like science. Yeah, the stuff you'd actually need to build a modern economy, pretty much ignored. And if you lived out in the countryside, which most people did, healthcare was basically a fantasy. So the CCP's plan wasn't just to patch things up. Oh no, they wanted to bulldoze the entire old system and build something brand new, all based on their communist ideology and this grand vision of a powerful, modern, industrial China. But how do you do that? They didn't have a ton of money for big, shiny projects. What they did have, though, was people. Millions and millions of people. And that was their secret weapon. The whole idea was to get everyone involved in these massive campaigns, all focused on really practical, down-to-earth stuff for health and education.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But what did it look like on the ground? Let's break down the actual methods they used to get this revolution started. When it came to education, they basically had a three-part attack plan. First up was pinyin. This was a total game changer. It's a phonetic system that uses the alphabet you and I know to spell out Chinese sounds. Suddenly, learning to read became way easier. Next, they rolled out these Minpan schools, which basically means run by the people out in the villages. And for the adults, they set up winter schools, these quick courses to give farmers the absolute basics of reading and writing.
And this image, it perfectly captures the official story the party was telling. You see this bright, happy, bustling classroom. It's the ultimate picture of progress, right? A new, educated China. This was the dream they were selling. Now, I want you to burn this image into your brain, because we're going to contrast it with the reality in just a little bit.
All right, now let's switch gears to healthcare. And guess what? We see the exact same playbook. Get everyone involved. Take a look at this poster from '52. Notice who the heroes are. It's not doctors in white coats. It's regular folks out there cleaning up their neighborhoods. The message couldn't be clearer. Your health is your job.
And these patriotic health movements, as they were called, were super practical. They weren't focused on fancy, expensive cures for diseases. They were all about stopping people from getting sick in the first place. So they organized everybody to do things like dig sewers, make sure the water was clean, get rid of trash, and yeah, even go after pests like flies and mosquitoes. It was totally low-tech, but it involved absolutely everyone. It was like turning the entire population into one giant public health army. Okay, so we've got the plan, we've got the methods, but here comes the million-dollar question, the one you always have to ask. Did it work? And this is where the story gets really interesting, because it's a total mixed bag of amazing successes and some pretty major failures. Let's start with the good news, and it is a big one. Check out this number. By 1957, the number of kids in primary school shot up from 26 million to 64 million. That is a huge jump. It shows that their big push to get more kids into school, especially out in the countryside, was actually making a difference. And you see this same practical mindset in the universities, too. They basically copied the Soviet model and totally remade higher education. By 1953, almost 2/3 of all university students were studying things like engineering, medicine, agriculture. Useful stuff. A complete 180 from the old days of studying ancient texts. But, and this is a big but, this is where things get messy. For pretty much every win, there was a pretty serious loss. So yeah, literacy went up. Great. But the quality of these new schools, a lot of them were awful. They stamped out some killer diseases, which is amazing, but at the same time, actual doctors were often attacked for being bourgeois intellectuals. Life expectancy got better for sure, but the gap between the city and the countryside, in terms of things like healthcare funding, it was still enormous.
Okay, remember that perfect-looking classroom from the propaganda poster I showed you earlier? Well, this quote right here, this is the reality check. It says, the village schools, the backbone of the whole literacy campaign, were often run by local party officials who, well, they could barely read themselves. So the quantity of schools went up, but the quality? Not so much.
And this leads to a really important shift. In 1958, a new rule came out that basically slammed the idea of education for education's sake. What this meant was, from that point on, being politically loyal to the party was often way more important for a teacher than actually knowing your subject. Yep. Ideology started to trump expertise, a huge turning point.
So where does all this lead in the long run? Well, instead of creating this perfectly equal society they talked about, the reforms accidentally built a whole new food chain. Only this time, it wasn't about who had the most money, it was about who had the best party connections.
What you end up with is this brand new kind of elitism. The best schools, the ones with all the money and the best teachers, were these key point schools in the cities. And guess whose kids went there? You got it, the children of high-ranking party members. Meanwhile, if you were a kid in the countryside, you were likely pushed into a vocational school to learn about farming. So that dream of true equality for everyone, yeah, it was still just a dream.
And all of this leaves us with one final massive question to chew on. Look, there's no denying it, the CCP's reforms did bring basic education and healthcare to millions of people who never had it before. That's a fact. But was the end goal a truly equal society, or was it really about creating a new, more efficient system of control, one that put a brand new party elite right at the very top? That's the real puzzle at the heart of this entire social revolution.